up all across the fruited plains of the internet. And then we can go ahead and get started because we've got a lot to get to today. And I want to make sure we're trying a couple things differently. I am maneuvering around with some new technology that we're playing with here today. So let me make sure that I am alive and well. Looks like we're good on YouTube. And all right, so let's go ahead and get started. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I, over the course of many years, have represented thousands of good people facing criminal charges. And throughout our time in practice, we have seen a lot of problems with our justice system. I'm talking about misconduct involving the police. We have prosecutors behaving poorly. We have judges not particularly interested in a little thing called justice. And it all starts with the politicians, the people at the top, the ones who write the rules and pass the laws that they expect you and me to follow, but sometimes have a little bit of difficulty doing so themselves. That's why we started this show called Watching the Watchers, so that together with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. And we're grateful that you are here and with us today. We've got a lot to get into. We're coming off hot of a long weekend, and I hope you had a very lovely and wonderful July 4th. I know I did. It was my mother's birthday, and we got to celebrate it yesterday. We got her a new electric bike, so she's able to actually, ride on one of these bikes electrically. Now, I've never ridden one, but I heard that they're pretty outstanding, but she happens to be in an ankle boot, so she can't ride a bike anyway. So didn't work out too well, but she'll heal up and she'll be on that bike. I hope you and your families had lovely barbecues celebrating America, because it is something to be celebrated, even though some people don't really think that to be the case. We're going to talk about that. We've got the NPR, the National Public Radio, is out there trashing the Constitution on their July 4th Twitter thread. So we're going to check in there. We've got some other blue checkmarks who are also unhappy with Independence Day and sort of American, I guess liberties or something like that. Cori Bush is also upset, talking about Independence Day essentially being for racist white people. We have a new INI/TIPP poll that says only 36% of young Americans are proud to be American, which is, of course, not a good trend. Joe Biden was out there, and he was sort of, bumbling around some different restaurants and some different buildings. And so he was asked about this new Russian hack that is sort of spreading around throughout the country right now. I think they want 70 million. Is it something like that? $70 million. And so somebody asked him about that. And so Joe Biden, because he doesn't really know what to say much about these things, he actually pulled out a note card to tell them that he doesn't have an answer. So he needed to reference a note card to say that I don't have an answer for you. So we're going to go through that. That's fun. We're going to take a look at some of the draft documents of the Declaration of Independence. This was pretty cool. I found this on Twitter. And they actually, somebody posted high-resolution images of the Declaration of Independence, but the draft version that, of course, Thomas Jefferson was working on. So I want to just show you that. And then there's this viral video of Mark Zuckerberg sort of scooting through the water, holding an American flag, all patriotic-like. And so we want to play that and take a look at that. So that's going to be in segment number one. Then it has been some time since we spoke about Ghislaine Maxwell. Maxwell is back in the news, and there's a couple interesting things going on here. So first and foremost, there was an order from Judge Allison Nathan that came out and said that they were going to unseal a bunch of documents. Of course, everybody is very interested in these documents because it might unveil something about what happened there. Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, Prince Andrew, all of the elite, Bill Gates, Donald Trump, the list goes on and on. They're all sort of involved, at least on the margins, with some of whatever Epstein was doing, and we want to know what's going on in there. So the judge unsealed several documents, and we want to take a look at them. Is there anything interesting? Not really. But there are some other interesting things going on in Maxwell's case. Now that Bill Cosby is out of prison, Maxwell wants to use the same theory to also get out of prison, saying, hey, Cosby's out. What the heck am I doing here? Because we both had non-prosecution agreements. Obviously, the Supreme Court in his state said that he could get out. So why can't I get out? So they fired off a letter to the judge, and we're going to go through that. And then also something happened where one of Maxwell's attorneys wrote this op-ed in the New York Daily News, and the prosecutors were not happy about that. They said, hey, we have rules here. You are not allowed to comment on these cases. And so they sent a letter over to the district court judge and said, Judge, you need to scold that lawyer over there for writing an op-ed over there. And so we're going to see where that goes. So that's going to be fun. And then lastly, we're going to take a look at a case involving a sergeant and a former Air Force veteran. Terrible situation, just a tragedy all around. This was taking place back in the summer of unrest last year during 2020. And there was a criminal justice movement. There was a Black Lives Matter protest. I'm not sure what the nature of the protest is. Of course, we're going to figure that out. But there were a lot of people in the streets. There was a lot of sort of, activity going on. And we have a Sergeant Daniel Perry who's driving down, and there's a crowd. There's some words that are exchanged. There's some gunshots that go off. And we have a Garrett Foster who is shot and killed. Garrett Foster, of course, is a former Air Force veteran. And so now what's been happening over this last year is there's been protests, and a lot of people are, of course, upset about this. The district attorney, Jose Garza, just came out and said murder charges for Sergeant Daniel Perry. And so we're going to analyze this case. I've got some video footage of it. We're not going to watch the entirety of the footage because it can be a little bit, of course, graphic. And so YouTube, we don't want them, we don't want to upset the censors over there, and we want to make sure that we can sort of analyze it without getting the video flagged. And so we'll go through some of that. Now, there is a lot to get into, and I want to invite you to be a part of the show, and that is available over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com, which is our platform where we're able to have conversations before and after the show. And I want to show you something even during the show. Check this out, my friends. Let's see if this works. Oh my goodness, what's happening right now? This is the Locals chat that you can see. And so we're going to be able to just kind of scroll through here and take a look at some of these questions. So for example, we have Soul Viking says, that's super. Glad technology was good to you. Hope you had a nice 4th, Soul Viking. We've got Thunder says, okay, Rob, I'll give you a reminder. When you get to that part, too bad no Miss Faith today, but looking forward to the show. Good topics. We've got ZZ Boxing Cat says, Mark Zuckerberg patriotic? That's an oxymoron. Yeah, we're going to get there. I'll talk a little bit about why we're including Zuckerberg in there, but that's what's going to be happening now. So if you want to participate in that chat, if you want to ask a question, if you want to get some of the goodies that are available over there, like a free copy of my book, we have monthly Zoom meetups. We have promo codes for some of the Gumroad offerings that I have, and it's all available at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. So go check that out. Thank you, everybody, for your support over there. We're going to have fun. Also, another quick note on that over at Locals. We did our live stream. I did a test live stream yesterday. Worked flawlessly. I have a couple kinks to work out in terms of interfacing my software with that, but I did it just natively, so we can just do live streams right over there on Locals. They also have events coming, so we can just put our monthly events over, and it's great. watchingthewatchers.locals.com if you want to go and be a part of the show. All right, so let's get into the news of the day. July 4th, for many Americans, that's kind of a day of reverence. We all want to just pause and recognize that, hey, America is a pretty great place for most of us, right? Most of us sort of on a daily basis say, hey, this is a great country. We have a lot of freedoms, a lot of liberties, especially if you've traveled in other parts of the world like I have. You know that sometimes things just aren't as free, right? You just can't do some of the things that you can do in other parts of the world that you can do in America. And I'm somebody who was born and raised here, and I sort of have a certain reverence for the founding fathers and the way that they were able to structure the government that we have. It sort of is this beautiful thing that has symmetry, and it has sort of a, checks and balances, and we are always conscious about liberty. We're always sort of holding back the tides of government, saying, nope, you're not allowed to do this, and being very clear and definitive about what some of our Bill of Rights are, and so on. And so I know that the country is not perfect, right? I've never made that claim, and I know it wasn't founded in this beautiful, sort of, godlike utopia, right? We all understand that. And I don't necessarily think that many people would even make that argument, right? I'm not sure that I've heard anybody out there say that America's perfect. It's always been perfect. It always will be perfect. And anybody who says otherwise is a lunatic and they hate America, right? It's never been that. It's always been about pausing on July 4th and just saying, okay, hey, this is a pretty good country despite some of its flaws. And I like to pause and sort of recognize that, but some other people just don't. I want to show you this from NPR. They said during their July 4th posting that 245 years ago, leaders representing the 13 British colonies signed a document to declare independence. It says that all men are created equal. That's right, it does. Then it says, but women, enslaved people, indigenous people, and many others were not held as equal at the time. And we go, okay, yes, we know that. We've got that, right? This reminds me of when you go to the holiday parties with your family, and you've always got that kind of one, kind of grump that sits in the corner a little bit, is always just sort of like moping around, kind of like Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. And they're just always just kind of dreary, doom and gloom. And I remember, one situation where I was at some party or something like that. And somebody, we're doing this white elephant gift or something. And somebody sends over this water bottle to somebody else. They open the water bottle. It's this nice one. It's got all this fancy stuff on it. And somebody says, well, you should probably check to make sure that's BPA free. And everybody just goes, what is wrong with you? It's Christmas, man. Jesus was just born. We're all celebrating. Like, why do you have to be such a drag on this one particular day? Okay. And so here's NPR, of course, doing the same thing. Yeah, it says all men are created equal, but not equal at the time of the founding of this, the time that they signed it. And you go, oh, all right, we've got it. But we know that you talk about this all other 364 days of the year. Can you just kind of leave it alone for one day? One day? They say no. So they say the document also includes a racist slur against Indigenous Americans. We've got author David Truer, who is Ojibwe, says that there is a lot of diversity of opinion and thought among Native Americans, a community of more than 5 million people, about the document's words because it has that racial slur against the Indigenous Americans. And this is on NPR, right? This is a publicly funded organization. These are your tax dollars going to this organization that just gets out there and is like, yeah, it is July 4th. And while all of you people who are sort of celebrating the benefits of America, let me just rub some salt in there. This country's garbage because of the founding fathers. They were all racist white men. Okay. So, it's just sort of like that punk at your Christmas party that won't leave you alone. They say in this thread of the Declaration of Independence, you can see a document with flaws and deeply ingrained hypocrisies. So, this is like the third tweet in their thread. It says it also laid the foundation for this country's collective aspirations, the hopes for what America could be. So there you go, right? That's a little bit, right? That's true, right? It's a framework. It was a constitution. It had the ability to be amended. It had all sorts of mechanisms for changing it and modifying it and making sure that we didn't have to have another revolution and giving the citizens some opportunities to take what we have that we all knew was imperfect and make it a little bit better. And so that was something that I thought was a good thing, right? You can't. It's hard to imagine a situation in anything in your life that you can just walk in and it's perfect the first go round. And so now we, of course, are asking ourselves, can America be better? Yes, certainly it can. But can NPR maybe have a positive day for about 5 minutes? The answer is no. And this is part of the problem because this is the belief that is permeating throughout society. And I'm going to show you a poll when we get there very soon that something like 39% of young people just they're not proud to be an American anymore. And we have to kind of ask ourselves why that is. And listen, I understand that there's a lot of people that don't like that concept, the idea that, you have to identify with a nation state or these types of things. But the concept here is America is this embodiment of many ideals, I think, that many people can sort of look to the founding documents to lean on. We talk about freedom of speech, and we talk about the right to keep and bear arms, and the right to be free from, quartering, and the right to be free from unlawful searches and seizures, and the list goes on. And so these are all sort of American concepts that we have codified into our provisions, into our Constitution. And you would expect that even one of the publicly funded radio shows would be supportive of that, but they're not. And this is trickling down. This is sort of spreading throughout the country. Here is Young Daddy over here on Twitter. He says, F Independence Day. Okay. Not only were we not free, the whole reason the colonies wanted independence was because Britain was moving towards abolishing slavery. Why would black people celebrate a day so wrapped up in our enslavement? Right. So, that's a perspective, I suppose, but it's just something that it's. Here's Cori Bush. Cori Bush is another elected representative. She says, when they say that the 4th of July is about American freedom, remember this, the freedom they're referring to is for white people. The land is stolen land and black people still aren't free. And you're just going, come on, it's July 4th. Can we just get along for one day? Cori Bush is of course, somebody who, this is her issue. This is what she talks about regularly. So I get that. But on July 4th, it's just like, all right, now we know that the poll says 36% of young people are proud to be American. So that's just over a third. It says from June 30th to July 2nd, they asked 1,424 adults. There was a margin of error of about 3 points. This marks the first in a weekly effort to gather some data. The poll generally shows strong pride in America, and it says that men, for example, are far more proud than women to be American. So 81% of men say they are extremely or very proud compared to only 65% of women, and single women are far less proud of their nationality than married women. So married women, like America, 70%, unmarried women are at about 51%. And so, you know, those are numbers, but the concerning one, of course, is here. This is ages 18 to 24. The poll finds that only 36% of this group say that they are very or extremely proud, making it the sole demographic group tracked among whom pride falls below 50%. The only demographic in the country that doesn't appreciate, I guess, being an American. The poll found an almost identical share of 18 to 24 crowd. 35% say they only slightly or not proud at all to be an American. And, you know, I think that this sort of doesn't bode well, right? We talk a lot about culture here on the show, and we talk about the idea of having a social fabric. I have somebody who has talked a lot about Edmund Burke here on this channel and about the concept of a social fabric, that a functioning society should have some cultures that sort of weave together and create this tapestry of order. And what we see right here is when every single sort of institution in this country is constantly being sort of, you know, unraveled a little bit, when family is being demolished, when church is being demolished, when your ability to speak freely is being demolished, when some of your rights to protect yourself are being demolished, when certain people that you want to follow are being thrown off the internet, and the whole sort of system feels like it's kind of crumbling a little bit, literally and figuratively. We have buildings falling down in Miami, and, you know, we have a lot of people that just talk doom and gloom all day. So why wouldn't it be something where young people say that maybe it's not ideal to be an American? So, you know, this is something that I think is well worth talking about. Every year that we have July 4th, it feels like there's this constant narrative that just keeps kind of going a little bit further and further. And now we have NPR that's out there saying, yeah, I mean, it's not so great here after all. Changing gears a little bit, here's Joe Biden. So Joe Biden was out there over the weekend, and he's out, you know, eating ice cream. The media was going hysterical about this. He had a waffle cone with 2 scoops of ice cream. Very exciting. And so he mashed his face into that. You can take a look in my thumbnail here on the channel and watch that. But I want to show you this little interaction here because I mentioned this at the start of the program. Here's Joe Biden, and he is in a shop. Let me make sure that my audio looks good. That sounds good. So he's in this shop, and somebody is asking him about this Russian hack, or the allegedly Russian hack. So if you've been following the news, I know it's hard to keep track of all the hacks. You have the pipeline hack, and we had the SolarWinds hack previously that we've talked about here. Well, now there's a new one out there, and it is a big problem, right? This is becoming an issue, a repetition that needs to be addressed. And so Joe Biden is in this store, and somebody from the media or somebody from off camera asks him a question and says, "Hey, Joe, what about the Russian hack? Do you have anything you want to say about that?" And so he goes on for about a minute and 30 seconds. We're going to watch this whole thing, and it's just, you know, this is not good, my friends. And look, you know, sometimes I feel really bad about kind of playing these clips, because I don't want to be somebody who is beating up on an old 78-year-old man with dementia, right? That's not what the show's about. But the show is about watching the watchers, and it is about making sure that we have an idea of what our elected representatives are doing. Here is Joe Biden specifically being asked about international relations, about Russia, potentially, you know, hacking some of our most serious infrastructure just after Joe Biden got back from the G5 or from the G7 when he was over there talking to a lot of these foreign leaders. And he had the meeting with Putin that nobody heard about because there was no joint press conference after the fact. And he warned Putin. He said, listen, if there's any more funny business coming out of Russia, there's going to be a big problem for you there, buddy boy. And he gave him a list of, I think, 16 or 17 things that he said are off limits. So now the question, of course, becomes, did he just draw a line in the sand? And if Putin just crossed that, what are we talking about? Is the U.S. going to retaliate? Are there going to be some repercussions going back the other direction? Well, maybe, right? Because that's what happens when you draw a line in the sand. You say, if you cross that line, there will be repercussions. So Joe Biden now is being asked about this, and he really, you know, he's not, in my opinion, quite capable of answering this on the fly. So what he does is he actually pulls out a note card, and then in the note card, well, listen to what his answer is, right? You would expect that a note card would give you some sort of really, you know, literate answer that would just provide a lot of information to the question. Watch what happens. He really doesn't answer much of anything. Now, in this video is clipped from RNC Research, which is the Republican National Convention. And I think this was actually taken from a live viewing. So this was something that was streamed over the internet. And you're going to notice that there is a actual sort of a freeze frame in the video. That's not on my end. That's not your stream. That's the recording. There's actually a freeze. I know some people out there might get concerned. They might say, well, is that just Joe Biden? I mean, he freezes all the time. Is that just him? No, it's the camera. It's not him technically. He still is kind of freezy, but the actual video does have some technical problems. So here is Joe. Remember what we're talking about, okay? This is a conversation about a hack from a foreign power that they have long said is one of our most concerning adversaries in the world. And Joe Biden is the president of the country. He's the commander in chief. If he says the wrong thing, that might indicate war, right? That might indicate that maybe the U.S. is going to do something. So you have to be very careful here. These are very volatile situations, which is why people have concern when you have somebody who doesn't really know what they're doing in charge of all of that. So let's take a look at what's happening here. Here is Joe Biden, and let's play.
Let me know if I can answer your question.
Sure.
Right now, sir?
Yeah.
With the most recent hack by the Russians, would you say that this means
We're
that...
not sure it's the Russians.
Okay. With
I
this most...
I got a brief as I was on the plane. That's why I was late getting off the plane. I got a brief, and
So that's the video.
all right.
Would you like your
Do we
receipt?
know who it might be, sir?
I'll be in better shape to talk to you about it. Hang on a second. I'll tell you what they sent me. Okay. The idea. First of all, we're not sure who it is for certain. Number one. And what I did, I directed the full resources of the government to assist in a response if we determine. What else you need?
Oh, nothing. You're all set.
Yeah, you're all set.
And the fact is that I directed the intelligence community to give me a deep dive on what's happened, and I'll know better tomorrow. And if it is either with the knowledge of and/or consequence of Russia, then I told Putin we will respond. And
You didn't tell him already, sir?
no, I haven't called because we're not certain. The initial thinking was it was not the Russian government, but we're not sure yet. So.
All right, so there's Joe, right? I mean, it's like a 2-minute clip, and he didn't say anything. Do you have any response? I'm not prepared to talk about that. And he says, well, hold on one second, pulls out his card, and he says, well, if they, we don't know who it is, first of all, and if we did, then maybe there'll be some consequences, something. In 2 minutes, and you go, oh my goodness, right? This is our world leader. This is who is up against Putin. What if Putin is actually out there hacking all of our infrastructure? Was that a sort of a full-throated response? No, it didn't look like that. So it's been an interesting July 4th holiday. Let's sort of set all of that aside. Let's look at something that's pretty great. Let's take a look at this. This is a Declaration of Independence draft, and I think it's just a beautiful piece of history. And take a look. Let's sort of read what's going on here. It says, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for it says one people here to dissolve the political bonds which have connected them with something together and Jefferson just gets rid of this whole line, right? Some of the powers of earth, and he says a separate and equal. So he deletes this line, talking about statism, talking about, we hold these truths to be, and he says self-evident here, right? He deleted this portion, that all men are created equal. And he deletes that, deletes this. And so I just thought this was somebody who has done a lot of editing in my time, that this was sort of a nice little snapshot of history, something pretty cool. When there's a lot of doom and gloom out there, there is some pretty remarkable things that sort of have lasted the test of time. And this is one of them. Let's see what else is in here. It says, it's actually really hard. The governments long established should not be for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experiences has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long tradition of abuses, of usurpations, begun at a distinguished period, I don't think that made it, same object, engineered to design, reduce, right? And this is sort of where he's saying it's time to, sort of declare independence. And if you've ever read the document, it's a beautiful thing. And he goes through a long list of the grievances that the United States, the colonies, have towards their tyrannical government back in England. And this was something that was not a minor consequence, right? This was a big deal. I think we had somebody over at Locals post this, and this was something that I thought was also pretty amazing. It says, by signing the Declaration of Independence, the 56 Americans pledged their lives to their fortunes and their sacred honor. It was no idle pledge. 9 signers died of wounds during the Revolutionary War. 5 were captured and imprisoned. Wives and children were killed, jailed, mistreated, left penniless. 12 signers' houses were burned to the ground. 17 lost everything they owned. No signer defected their honor, like their nation remained intact. And I was thinking about that. I'm just, man, these guys have major cojones, right? You have to go back there and say, that would be like, landing in a new place and just saying, hey, I'm going to sign this document that says, hey, America, we're not your citizens anymore. And I'm going to sign that. That's a big deal, right? You got to have some serious cojones there. Now, here is Mark Zuckerberg. So this video was very interesting, and I have some thoughts about this video. So here is Zuckerberg now, just doing the patriotic thing. And we've talked a lot about Zuckerberg here. We've talked about Zuckerberg and Priscilla Chan. They founded that organization that donated something like $400 million during the last election that was funneled out to very specific counties and jurisdictions throughout the country. And many state legislatures are now sort of saying, hey, that didn't really feel like that was democracy. It felt like a billionaire was sort of coming in and usurping some of the electoral underpinnings. And there's some pushback going on. So now people are wondering, what's Mark Zuckerberg doing over here, where he's on a lake, just strolling down the road here, country road, singing along, and he's doing this flag thing while he's on the actual river here, right? And so, of course, that looks fun and that looks nice, but, I'm not going to play the whole thing because the YouTube will ding us for the song. But Zuckerberg's out there now, just, Mr. America out there with this huge flag, just kind of strolling down the ocean. You're going, well, that's weird because your platform was sort of censoring people. Your platform was giving us the alerts. Hey, did you go vote? And COVID and all these things on a regular basis. And so, you were sort of kind of anti-American in many ways. We're talking about freedom of speech, the freedom to express yourselves, the freedom to associate. And now it feels like Zuckerberg is Captain America out there. And so that's kind of weird. The actions don't match the other actions that we've seen historically from Zuckerberg. So an interesting video, wondering if it's part of this new makeover from Zuckerberg. We know that, Bill Gates has sort of, really used a lot of his wealth to create this facade about who he is. Zuckerberg went around and did his little, around the country tour. Many people were speculating he was going to run for president. We have Bezos now, who's retiring from Amazon and going up to space. So all the billionaires are sort of doing their little jockeying. And Mark Zuckerberg is, of course, Captain America now. So interesting stuff. Interesting July 4th. I hope everybody had a tremendous July 4th. It is something I think that we should pause and be proud of and reflect upon the things that we do have, because many people throughout our world are just not as fortunate as we are. And so God bless America. God bless the United States. God bless you and your families and our troops on that matter as well. So let's take a look at what are we doing here? Oh, so this is new, right? Let's take a look at some questions. Before we do, quick reminder that I am a criminal defense lawyer over at the R&R Law Group. Of course, if you need some help with a criminal charge, 480-787-0394 is the place to find us over at rrlawaz.com. Of course, we offer safety, clarity, and hope for good people facing criminal charges. We offer free case evaluations, and we'd love to speak with your team. We would love to speak with you. Our team would love to speak with you. All right. You can tell I'm a little bit rusty. It's been a few days. And if you're not interested and you don't need legal services, that's a good thing. But if you're interested in any of my other offerings, please check out gumroad.com/Robert Gruler. Check out my law enforcement interaction training if you want to maybe learn about the 1, 2, 3 rule for dealing with law enforcement and really how you can protect yourself. There's 2 questions that the police can ask you that you have to answer. There's 3 responses that you can use if they don't ask you one of the 2 approved questions. If they ask you any other thing than an approved question, reject that with the 3 responses. And so that's available at gumroad.com/Robert Gruler. Okay, so now we're going to go over to the chat and let's take a look how this works. You can see that what I've got going on right now. So for those of you who do not know, I have sort of 2 switchers here. I've got one switcher here that changes between the camera and the desktop, and I've got another switcher here now that changes between this mode and the chat mode. And so I am sort of it's like riding a bike. I'm going to try to figure it out, and we're going to do our best. So let's take a look at some of the questions. We've got Jeremy Matrita is here, says, I heard an argument made recently by a YouTuber. I've been getting certain types of news updates. He said, it's unfortunate that certain topics have forced us to be more divided due to many YouTubers going to many different platforms. The left is united, but everyone else is divided. I see. So I think that's actually true, right? We're on Locals, we're on Rumble, we're on Odyssey, and I think a lot of other YouTubers are doing the same thing. Everybody is sort of really concerned about keeping all of their eggs in one basket because, as we know, right, what if this had been my only source of revenue? What if I wasn't a lawyer, didn't have a law firm or anything like that, and we got demonetized? For other creators out there, that's it. That's the end of the deal, right? They've got to go find a different platform or an alternative. And so, you know, we're very fortunate that we have a little bit of resilience here in that regard. All right, we've got some other questions. Let's go on over to Ghost Runner. It says, good Lord, Biden is so hard to watch, but it's watching some senile old man. At least he doesn't tweet mean things. That's true. We've got Nadarb says, he's in the house. He says, I'm going to need to see some undeniable proof these are Putin's doings because they have proven to us that they are willing to lie, especially when it comes to Mother Russia. I honestly like that answer from him, though, better than him channeling corn pop. I guess that's true, right? Don't say anything rather than him trying to get clever. That's a good point. And he really doesn't know. So I guess that's right. Saying nothing is better than anything. That's a good point. We've got Zuck is here. What's up, Zuck? Good to see you. We've got Want to Know says, it's amazing they did such a good job of erasing the strings that move the body of Biden around, right? He's sort of like a, yeah, I know. It's terrible. Farmer's Daughter is here, says, the left has been at this for 100 years. Small numbers, but placed strategically, most notably education. That's the reason young people hate this country. They have been told there's nothing good about it. And I've talked about that, right? My education was very much analogous to, I don't think it was nearly as bad as some of what we see today. But even when I was in high school, even when I was in college, even when I was in law school, it was very anti-American. I told you the story when I was in that the women's only class, and it was just like a scolding of me personally in front of the class. It's a weird situation they have in education these days. Another one from Jeremy says, absolutely, they've been waiting a long time to do this for a long time in our nation. We have Three Girlies is here, says, perhaps we should be teaching the original draft of the Declaration of Independence. Perhaps by saying that original draft, people would be able to shut their mouth over the founders were not against slavery. Is because of the compromises the founding fathers had to make in order to get everyone to sign that document. Sad that the rhetoric of slavery being a mortal sin was taking out of the original draft of the Declaration of Independence. Yeah, and it's like that's the point, right? Nobody here is advocating for slavery or for any of the inhumanity that happened back then. But it was a very volatile situation. And I think some people that just sort of exist in society and just say, well, everything has to be exactly how it is. And it's sort of this, you know, AOC kind of makes this argument regularly, and she got blasted for it by somebody who is actually aware of how this works. AOC was sort of criticizing and condemning Peru for using too much coal power. And so she comes out and says, well, we got to shut it all down. The only thing that matters is the planet. And so if you shut down coal power in Peru, guess what happens? Nobody has power. Guess what happens? It's summertime. People start dropping dead. So you can always just sort of stand back and criticize an institution. You can always just come down and just tear it down. In fact, Jordan Peterson talks about this. I think it's Rule 1 in his new book, Beyond Order. Do not carelessly denigrate institutions, right? You have to make sure that before you're just going to come out here and just start, you know, throwing elbows at institutions, which we do a lot of here, that you're sort of, you know, you've thought through it. You've been cognizant about what your baseline, your foundational principles are before you just start, you know, trashing everything. And so, yes, the founding of the country was not 100% perfect. Nobody's making the argument that it was, but it was an improvement upon some of the old world, you know, histories. And it was a new novel concept that's resulted in a lot more freedom for a lot more people than might have otherwise occurred. All right. So let's see what else we've got. We've got ZZ the Boxing Cat says, God bless these United States. And we have Want to Know here. What did I just click on? We got Want to Know says, the live chat. Kareem says, sad to see so many not proud to be an American. Forget that white privilege nonsense. And we've got Farmer's daughter says Glenn Beck on the Blaze TV is narrating the entire 1776 project. Jeremy Matrita says, however, you have done well by broadcasting to all the platforms simultaneously. So those are some good questions. And of course, all of those came over from watching thewatchers.locals.com. Thank you for everybody who is supporting us over there. Appreciate all of your love. All right. So we're going to change gears yet again. Ghislaine Maxwell is back in the news. We've spent a lot of time talking about Ghislaine Maxwell because she has one of the most interesting cases that we've seen, at least from a criminal defense perspective, in my opinion. She's got a handful of lawyers. They are filing documents left and right. Every day it's just sort of this cascade of legal arguments that are being made from every direction. And it's actually very impressive, right? I've done a lot of criminal law. I've seen a lot of cases. We've talked about a lot of different cases on this channel even. And the scope, the volume of materials that I've seen in Ghislaine's case are just a sight to be seen. There really is something there. So I want to show you what's happening here. The Independent came out. They're giving us an update. They say dozens of documents about Ghislaine Maxwell's personal affairs will be made public, according to a judge. A judge ruled that last week. We saw on July 1st, this new order came out from Judge Allison Nathan. This is out of the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York. And a couple things I just want to point out. We're talking about unsealing of documents, okay? Here, in this case, Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein, we've got decades of, sex trafficking allegations and sexual activity involving children and minors and all sorts of horrendous allegations. And this case has been really, working its way through our system for a long time. We've had many different people with their hands in the cookie jar trying to prosecute it and not prosecute it. We remember that Jeffrey Epstein, was prosecuted and he kind of got a slap on the wrist at one point in time. And then now they got him again. And then, of course, he didn't kill himself, but he's not with us anymore. And then they went and they found Ghislaine Maxwell. And so now they're sort of, picking up where they left off with Jeffrey Epstein, and they're just, running with it in Maxwell's case. And so a lot of this stuff has been very, very volatile. We've had a lot of different efforts to seal the documents to make sure that nobody could ever see them. Because as we all know, most documents in the court of law are public record. We can just go online and get them. But in Maxwell's case, there have been tons of documents. And we have talked about this previously. The number was something like 2.7 million pages of documents in this case. And when Ma Fox was here several months ago, he was telling us that if you actually sort of stack that up, it'd be something like, 900 feet or meters or whatever the calculation was. It would be like a skyscraper in terms of documents. So how could any defendant go through all of those things? It's sort of a due process violation in and of itself. And so we've all been wondering, where are the documents? Where are these 2.7 million documents? What's going on here? What was Epstein really involved in? What was Maxwell involved in? Which one of our elected officials was also sort of in on the scheme? And now we're hoping for some answers because the judge came out and unsealed some things. What did she unseal? Well, right here we have what's called a motion to suppress evidence. And so that was filed previously on June 25th. And the court came out and said, since nobody has any redactions to that motion, we're going to unseal it. A motion to suppress evidence is kind of exactly what it sounds like. It says, hey, we've got some evidence here that we think is tainted, and we're going to try to get that thrown out in court. So a good example would be in a DUI case, trying to get, let's say, for example, the blood results thrown out in the DUI case. So if somebody's being charged with a DUI, one of the most damning pieces of evidence is, of course, the blood results. And typically what happens is they'll draw 2 vials of your blood. That will get wrapped up. They'll impound it. They'll transport that down into an evidence locker. It will sit there until the forensic scientists pull it out and then do their analysis on it. And so what we're talking about is if you're able to now throw out a certain piece of evidence, in this case, it might be the blood results. Maybe they're tainted. Maybe the person, the analyst, the person who is pipetting the blood out screwed something up. And that is now no longer valid evidence. So if you're trying to suppress that, that means it doesn't come into court. It never actually makes it into the court of law, and it can't be used as evidence against the defendant. Very common type of case, but of motion, but it's also something that is not usually sealed. So in this case, the question is, why is this sealed? Why was this sealed in the first place? Well, it says now that there are no redactions being made, so nobody cares if it's unsealed. So the judge unsealed it, okay, and it's now available. She also unsealed an April 9th memorandum decision about a protective order in a different case, in the Guffrey versus Maxwell case. And we've also got some transcripts that came out of an ex parte hearing that also happened in 2019. And so we've got exhibits D, E, F, and G here. And so the court came out, Judge Allison Nathan said, everybody file your documents by July 2nd. And so many lawyers, many defense attorneys like myself, were all going, oh my goodness, is it Christmas in July? Are we going to get this treasure trove of documents? Is there going to be some juicy, spicy meatballs in here? No, there wasn't. There wasn't anything any good. Here is what we've got. This is a screenshot from the exhibits that came out here from the ex parte hearing. You can see we've got Exhibit D, E, F, and G, and there's just not much there. Remember what I was telling you, that there was something like 2.7 million pages of documents that are being transferred around, thrown all over the place. And now what we've got are 50-something pages of documents here. Exhibits D, E, F, and G. And when you look through them, they're not even that interesting. They're just sort of documents that say it's just a transcript of an ex parte hearing. Not that interesting. There are some interesting things that did come out, though, after the fact. So the day after this happened, and the day after the judge made this order, remember what happened? Bill Clinton is out of custody. He got released from prison because there was a non-prosecution agreement that allegedly, or the Supreme Court found, was in fact violated. And so I want to show you this. This is what's happening in Maxwell's case. We've got Maxwell now. You can see here in the case of United States versus Maxwell, this was filed on July 2nd, just a couple days ago, sent off by Cohen and Gressler. These are one of Maxwell's many lawyers. Send this letter over to the Honorable Allison Nathan. They say, Dear Judge Nathan, we're sending you this letter because we want to call your attention to this recent case that came out of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. They're talking about the Bill Cosby case. They say the court got rid of Cosby's conviction and sentence. Why? Because the district attorney's office that prosecuted him didn't live up to a non-prosecution agreement. And they're saying Maxwell's case presents a very similar situation. Accordingly, what they want is the court to dismiss several counts. Counts 1, 3, 5, 6, and of the S2 supervening indictment for violation of the NPA. The NPA is a non-prosecution agreement. So I want to frame this out briefly. Well, it's in the letter. Let's take a look at this. So they're going to explain to us what's happening in Cosby. Okay, so here's what Maxwell's doing. She's saying, listen, you know, he got a cookie, Mom, and I didn't get a cookie, so I want a cookie as well. And here's why I should get one. Cosby got a cookie, and that's a good deal, and you know he deserved it, and also I deserve a cookie, so can I have a cookie as well? And what they're going to do here in this letter is give us a little bit of background. They're going to explain what's going on, and let's run through it quickly, and then we'll break down what's happening here. So in the Cosby case, why is Cosby out of custody? Well, there was a woman named Andrea Constand. So she said that Cosby assaulted her sexually in January 2004. Okay. She did not immediately report that to the law enforcement authorities. Then in January 2005, so about a year later, 1 year, she then reported it to the police. Montgomery County Attorney's Office, so the prosecutor then, his name was Bruce Castor, he determined that he can't bring charges against Cosby. We're not going to be able to do it. He says there's insufficient, credible, and admissible evidence. He says you waited a year. He said among the factors that justified him not bringing the charges, he said she waited a year to file her complaint. It diminished the reliability of her claim and her recollections. Also, her statements about the event themselves were inconsistent. There was a lack of corroborating evidence, and she continued to speak and meet with Mr. Cosby even after the assault. And number 5, she had contacted civil attorneys to pursue financial compensation through a lawsuit against Mr. Cosby. So, you know, this woman goes, she says, I'm going to sue Bill Cosby. She goes and says, I'm going to file a criminal charge against Bill Cosby because I was sexually assaulted in 2004. It's now a year later. She goes to the prosecutor. The prosecutor, Bruce Castor, comes back and says, hey, we can't make our case here. It was a year ago. Right? We don't have any sexual evidence. We haven't done a sexual examination. We have no real evidence. So here's what we can do instead. How about we just file or allow you to recover in the civil lawsuit? We can't win this criminally. There are a couple of reasons why. You waited too long. Your recollections are bad. You're not reliable. Some of your statements are inconsistent. And even after you claimed this happened in January, you still hung out with Bill Cosby anyways. So in other words, you're not a credible witness. A jury is not going to believe you. So now what can you do? Well, we know that you already filed a lawsuit against Bill Cosby. So maybe we can use that route to get you some recovery. So let's take a look here. DA Castor issued a signed public statement declining to prosecute Mr. Cosby. Which he never viewed as Cosby's lawyers understood to be an agreement that Mr. Cosby would never be prosecuted for the events involving Miss Constant. Okay, so there's a public statement here from the prosecutor back in 2000, whenever this was, 2005, saying that we are not going to prosecute Bill Cosby. Okay, he said okay, so Cosby says, if you're not going to prosecute me, great. It's a signed document. It's out there in the public. That means that I can go out there now and speak without having to be fearful of self-incrimination. I know you're not going to prosecute me for this incident with Miss Constant, and so now I'm willing to talk about it. But only on the basis that you're not actually going to prosecute me, right? You're not going to sort of be allowed to hang that over my head and then get me to go speak openly and then sort of bring those charges back from Cosby's position. So what Cosby says is, believing that he no longer had a basis to assert his Fifth Amendment rights, Mr. Cosby testified at several depositions in a civil suit brought against him by Miss Constant. And during that deposition, he made some admissions, right? He made some say things like, yeah, I actually, gave women Quaaludes in order to sleep with them, which is totally illegal, right? If you're going to be drugging women to have sex with them, that is a crime. Now, what he did, of course, is he made those admissions after there was already a conversation that had taken place that he would not be prosecuted in that case at that time. 10 years later then, the successor district attorney, we have Risa Vetra Furman, used those admissions during the deposition to charge Mr. Cosby with the same crimes related to the sexual assault of Mr. Constant. Cosby then was convicted of those charges at trial. So they used his statements in that deposition against him. They said they weren't going to do it. They did it anyways. They had one prosecutor come back 10 years later, charge him anyways. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court came out and they said that the first attorney's promise was enforceable. The district attorney the new district attorney 10 years later was not allowed to bring charges against him again. It was violating his due process rights. So as a result, the court vacated Cosby's conviction, right? So Cosby goes free now because the original prosecutor made a promise. And then Cosby gave consideration for that promise. There was an exchange there. Prosecutor said, listen, we can't get you criminally. We know that she's brought a lawsuit against you civilly. Money is another alternative. Rather than putting you in prison, maybe it's just about compensation, or maybe the victim in this case will be happy with just compensation. And we're going to let that civil case move forward. So the non-prosecution agreement then would have prohibited a second prosecution. And Cosby agreed with the non-prosecution. He actually went out there and testified. He, in good faith, went out there and said, hey, this is my story. Then they charged him again. Totally inappropriate. The court came out and said, not allowed. Conviction overturned. You're free now. So Maxwell's attorneys then come back out and they say the same principle that got Cosby free applies to Miss Maxwell. As in Cosby, the government is trying to renege on its agreement. And they want to prosecute Miss Maxwell over 25 years later for the same exact offenses for which she was granted immunity in the non-prosecution agreement. Indeed, the principle applies even more strongly in Maxwell's case because the NPA was a formal written agreement as opposed to an informal one like the one in Cosby. This is not consistent with principles of fundamental fairness. So accordingly, they want counts 1, 3, 5, 6 of the supervening indictment to be dismissed. This is signed off on by attorney Christian Everdell over from Cohen and Gressler out of New York on 3rd Avenue. So it's an interesting argument, okay? And now we have to think about this sort of in a couple different layers. So here in Cosby's case, right, this was a state court claim, came out of Pennsylvania. It worked its way up through the Pennsylvania State Court. In Arizona, we call these superior courts. And in Pennsylvania, it was through a trial court, through a court of appeals. It went all the way up to the Supreme Court there. And the Supreme Court came out and said, nope, not allowable. Conviction is overturned. So that's in state court. Now, remember, Ghislaine Maxwell is not in state court. She's in the Southern District of New York, which is a federal court. And so it's an entirely different jurisdiction. So now what sort of Maxwell's attorneys have to do is show that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court is compelling enough, it's persuasive enough. The arguments that were in that case are persuasive enough to carry over into the federal framework. just because it's two different systems. So just because Cosby got out doesn't necessarily mean that Maxwell's going to get out, right? It's an entirely different situation. But the argument, nonetheless, is still good. And candidly, right, I don't know the specifics here. I'm going to be very curious to see what the prosecutors say, because the prosecutors are going to respond to this, and they're going to tell us that no, right, Cosby is distinguishable. Maxwell should not be released based on the non-prosecution agreement. But if you're just thinking about this from sort of a fundamental fairness perspective, if you entered into an agreement, if you signed a document that says you're not going to prosecute me, and then somebody else turns around and prosecutes you for that, that's a problem, right? That's a violation of all sorts of due process rights, because they are making agreements. You are giving consideration for that. You're exchanging something of value. In this case, Cosby was actually exchanging information about what happened so that he could sort of expose himself to liability. Bad framing there. Cosby opened himself up to liability civilly, right? And now Maxwell's attorneys are making the argument that that same principle should apply in her case. All right, so Cosby now, we have another one of Maxwell's attorneys. So here's Maxwell's attorney. His name is David Oscar Marcus, and he wrote this letter or this op-ed or this opinion piece in the New York Daily News. He says, Bill Cosby is free. Ghislaine Maxwell should be too. He posted this June 30th, and he says the Pennsylvania Supreme Court did the right thing when it threw out Bill Cosby's conviction. He says prosecutors cheated. They promised Cosby that they would not prosecute him if he would testify in civil cases against him. Based on that promise, Cosby testified. He did not invoke his Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. Prosecutors then broke their promise and used Cosby's statements in those depositions to win a conviction against him. This is Maxwell's attorney on her current case. Okay, and so you say, wow, so he's out there sort of like, advocating on behalf of this, right? Sort of the court of public opinion now. He's out there saying Cosby's free, same underlying legal principle, same concept, fundamental fairness mandates that Maxwell also be released. Well, he published this in the Daily News, and the government was not so happy about this. In fact, they fired a letter right off back to the court, and they say, Judge, he's breaking the rules. This is what the document looks like. It says, Dear Judge Nathan, the government respectfully submits this letter to bring to the court's attention an opinion called the op-ed that was published yesterday in the New York Daily News. It was authored by Davis Marcus Esquire, who is, of course, Maxwell's attorney. He represents her in connection with this case. Mr. Marcus's statements in the op-ed were in violation of Local Rule 23.1, they say, which contains provisions relating to extrajudicial public statements by attorneys. Accordingly, for the reasons stated below, the government respectfully requests that the court order Mr. Marcus to comply with the rules. So it's just what prosecutors do. They say, you're violating the rules, right? Hey, how about the argument? Are they going to respond to the argument? Well, certainly, I would imagine that they will soon, but we haven't seen it, right? So Marcus comes out and he says, hey, what they did to Cosby was wrong. They did the same thing to Maxwell, so she should also be released. He writes a letter, fires that off to the New York Daily News, and the government says, you just violated Local Rule 23.1 there, buddy boy, and they're going to ask the court to make sure that doesn't happen again. So that's what's happening in the Ghislaine Maxwell case, and we're going to have continued updates there, so hopefully you stick around and subscribe for that. Now, Miss Maxwell is, of course, she's got a whole slew of attorneys. Most people don't need about 20 lawyers like she has, but some people do need a good team. And of course, that's what we are. Over at the R&R Law Group, we've got an amazing team of attorneys and people who really help good people facing criminal charges find safety, clarity, and hope in their cases and beyond that in their lives. We offer free consultations. Our phone number is 480-787-0394. You can find us online at rrlawaz.com. And if you want, you can take a picture with this QR code. It will take you right on over to our website where we are ready and available to help. We love to help good people. We have a whole team of amazing people that are good at what we do, and we really love the work that we do. If you are not in need of legal services, that's a good thing. I want to invite you, though, to take a look at my Gumroad account over here. It's gumroad.com/Robert Gruler. I've got some good offerings there. Law enforcement interaction training, which is a 2.5-hour course where we learn all about the 1-2-3 rule for dealing with law enforcement, just to make sure that you protect yourself in the event that you're dealing with law enforcement. All right, so let's take a look at some questions coming in over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Let's see who is up in the house. We've got Jeremy says, deal or not, how did they convince his lawyers to allow him to confess? From a defense standpoint, I would guess you would never admit anything no matter what. So I think that would be Cosby's case, right? So in Cosby's case, they're talking specific, there was an agreement, and it wasn't as formalized as I would have been comfortable with, but it was still something that was sort of known. And the charges truly didn't come until about 10 years later, right? When we had the new county attorney come into place. And so it's kind of, it worked out for him, right? Because the fact that he did testify means that he got out of prison early. Now, in my opinion, right, he should have never been prosecuted in the first place. What those prosecutors did was make a deal with him that they violated, and I think that that is unethical. All right, let's see what else we've got. We've got Three Girlies is here. Says, I heard some commentary that Weinstein would try the same thing. The idea was that Cosby got out of jail, so Weinstein would try to get off the same way. Turns out it is Maxwell. Yeah, you're probably going to see it from Weinstein too, but I don't know if he had the same agreement. If you are being charged with a sexual assault case and you have in your history any sort of non-prosecutorial agreement, non-prosecution agreement, then yes, you should be referencing the Cosby case all day. Now, but typically you would imagine, right, these are long, sort of higher profile cases like we see with Cosby or Maxwell, where you might have a long history of sort of these high profile cases that might involve some non-prosecution agreements, right? Not everybody who is charged with sexual assault is in something that is that meaty, like Cosby was, of course. Nadarb's here. Nadarb says he never truly recovered after they took Little Bill off the air. We have, I don't know what that was. Is that a cartoon? We have the Boxing Cat says, Ma Maxwell must identify as a Republican. It's a two-tier justice system. We have Three Girlies says, I miss the old Bill Cosby when he liked pudding pops and drew a little squiggly lines. He was a good sitcom dad. He went down fast. Yeah. We've got Nadarb says, something tells me the severity of their crimes are a tad bit different. Want to know says, would it matter if these were state and federal prosecutors? One makes promises, one uses evidence against you like a civil rights violation. It's a great question, Want to know. And yeah, you've got two different jurisdictions and you've got two different, types of charges. And what you can see happen is exactly what we see with Chauvin, right? Chauvin was charged locally in state court, in the court of Minneapolis. And that ultimately needed to be dealt with. But we saw that there were some conversations about a global plea deal also involving the federal civil rights charges. So, sometimes they'll want to wrap those things up into one. We recall in the Chauvin case that there was some conversations taking place around the plea deal, and William Barr, Trump's attorney general, put the nix on that. Didn't allow that to happen, largely because I think that the deal that he was envisioning was a little bit too soft, and it didn't wrap everything up into one. I think it was just a 10-year deal, which would have been short given the fact that Chauvin got 22 and a half years, of course. Let's see what else we've got. We've got Thunder in here. Says, Thunder 9 says, the SDNY are like a mafia with rules they make up to suit their left-wing Democratic allies. They gave Epstein a slap on the wrist decades ago for having sex with minors, but spent 4 years trying to convict Donald Trump. We've got, let's see what else we've got. We've got Joe Snow's talking. We've got some chats going on. We've got, let's see, Bill Cosby here says, when he used to be a normal human, then he became an even creepier human. Yeah, look, I'm not dismissing anything that Bill Cosby did, right? I'm not at all. But due process is due process. And if you've got a prosecutor who's making an agreement and then violating that, that's not appropriate at all. So, he can be somebody who did a lot of, awful things, but he still deserves the presumption of innocence. We still don't want the government to railroad anybody, no matter what the severity of the crimes are. Because what happens is I always talk about the pendulum, but it swings both ways, right? We have a situation where it may be good to dogpile on somebody. It doesn't matter who it is. It could be Jeffrey Epstein. It could be, Derek Chauvin. It could be Bill Cosby. It could be Harvey Weinstein. It could be the insurrectionists, the MAGA protesters, right? Anytime that there's this massive dogpile, sometimes it feels good and everybody just says, oh, that's great, right? Those people are useless. We don't even need to have a trial because we all saw what happened and we know how this works. And no, right? That's when we need the presumption of innocence the most. That's when we need due process the most. That's when defense attorneys should be sort of tumbling all over themselves to represent that person, because that's the hard line, right? Everybody can have an easier time representing somebody for that's a good defendant, right? Oh, that she's a grandma. Oh, she's a college student. Oh, this person is a amazing individual. That's fine, right? Everybody go, okay, well, we can work with this person and we can go and negotiate and we'll tell them about all the good things that you're doing with your life. Right? Those are ideal candidates. The most heinous crimes, those are the ones that everybody runs away from, and that's when you need a defense the most. Good questions. Let's see what else. Let's take a look. A couple quick other ones. No Doubt is here, says, I didn't get the impression that the Supreme Court decision was narrow. Why would it make a difference of whether the agreement was between federal or state court? It was narrow. So, yes. So in the Cosby case, I think that you're right. It wouldn't, right? It would be the same. Well, I don't know I don't know on that one, right? I'd have to sort of look into the case law on it, but I think your point, no doubt, is essentially that if Cosby goes and testifies during the deposition in the civil case, that should immunize him from any criminality coming from the law enforcement system, regardless, whether it comes from the state court or from the federal jurisdiction, from the U.S. Attorney's Office or from the state prosecutors. It should insulate him. And probably what happened, it was just a jurisdictional conversation, right? We have a situation where there's a sexual assault allegation that is a state crime. Federal jurisdiction, typically wouldn't find a way to work itself into that case. So as long as in that situation there was a pretty clear understanding that there was not going to be a prosecution there, I don't think that Bill Cosby would have to worry about federal charges coming down the pike for him. Now, that's different than Ghislaine Maxwell's case. Okay, Ghislaine Maxwell, because her charges did not originate as a state charge. Hers involved all sorts of international stuff, right? The allegations were that these people were being trafficked internationally and to the Epstein Island and so on and so forth. So the feds got her case right away. And, I guess which I think that was the case though anyways. I think with her prior plea agreement, the non-prosecution agreement, which happened previously with Epstein. Remember in Epstein's case, they said that any one of Epstein's accomplices also could not be prosecuted. It was sort of one of the most sweetheart deals that anybody coif have ever gotten. And so I think that would have applied to everything. And so that's what Maxwell's attorneys are arguing. I think it makes good sense. Let's see if we've got some other ones. We've got Maxwell complaining about being locked up. We've got Nadarb says, we've got some madness in the house. All right, good questions, everybody. Thank you for all your support over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And we've got one more segment to get through today before we wrap up and get on out of here. But we got one more question. Let's do this. See the Veil says, we don't know the full discussion between that prosecutor and Bill Cosby with the NPA deal. They could have been threatening him with the constant haunting of a crime he didn't commit, and thus just confess it all goes away. Because he did the confession, then everyone assumes it's true. How do we know if he was innocent versus the prosecutors harassing him into a confession? Hollywood is plagued with all kinds of false allegations, and then the real crimes never get prosecuted. So let's see. Innocent versus... Yeah, it's a good question there, See the Veil. They could have been threatening him with constant haunting of a crime he didn't commit. So I think what Cosby's strategy there was, of course, is just to go talk during the civil deposition, settle the case, right? Pay her money. He's got gobs of it, and settle everything out that way. The prosecutors picked it up 10 years later, and they decided to charge him regardless. And so you can't do that. Because here's why. If they would have told him that we're going to continue to prosecute you, he never would have given the deposition. His attorneys would have said, you're not talking. Are you out of your mind? You're not going to say anything. So it was consideration. It was actually, there was some exchange that took place there. All right. So those are all great questions, all coming over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. All right. We're going to move on here. We're going to change gears. We've got one more segment, one more story of the day. Sergeant Daniel Perry was just charged with murder and aggravated assault for fatally shooting a protester in Austin in 2020. The man's name, of course, was Garrett Foster. You may have heard about this case. I think we touched on it briefly. We covered so many different shootings and protests last year because there were so many of them. Of course, we're talking about the summer of unrest of 2020. A lot of mayhem following in the aftermath of the George Floyd killing. And now we're still dealing with a lot of the fallout. We just had Derek Chauvin's trial. We've got the other 3 officers' trials coming up. We've got a number of other officers being charged with crimes throughout the country. And this case is also just hitting the court docket. Now, this is Army Sergeant Daniel Perry. This story comes over from the Texas Tribune. It says that he was in fact indicted. He shot and killed Foster. We're going to see him next, who was legally armed at the time. Okay, so we've got Foster. Garrett Foster is right here, and this is his fiance, I believe. And here we have Sergeant Daniel Perry. And so in this shooting, we've got a protest taking place, protesting police brutality last summer. Perry, who did the shooting, this gentleman here, argues that he was firing in self-defense. And so we've got some video footage here. Content warning on this segment. It's not going to be anything that we're going to see up close. We are going to hear some gunshots, though, and we're going to see. The only reason that I want to play this is because it is important for context. There was so much happening so quickly that it's really going to be a difficult case, I think, for both sides to make. If you're a prosecutor or a defense, you're going to see there's a lot of activity happening. So let's get some background here. There's a Travis County in Texas grand jury came back on Thursday. They indicted Army Sergeant Daniel Perry on charges of murder, aggravated assault, and deadly conduct after he shot and killed Garrett Foster, armed protester downtown Austin last year. Former Fort Hood soldier turned himself in, was shortly released after around 2:30 p.m. on a $300,000 bond. So he's out on custody, according to Kristen Dark, spokesman for Travis County Sheriff's Office. Now, as we showed you previously, right, here is Garrett Foster, rest in peace. We have Sergeant Daniel Perry. And, both of these guys are former Sergeant Daniel Perry was active military. Garrett Foster was former Air Force. And now, of course, Garrett Foster's dead. Right. Okay. So more background on July 25th. What happened here? Perry stopped his car. So Perry is driving the car. Here is Sergeant Daniel Perry. He's driving the car. And when he was stopped, he honked at people protesting police brutality. They walked through the street blocks away from the state capitol. Seconds later, he drove his car into the crowd, the police say. Okay, so we're going to watch this video here in a minute. Foster, who is this gentleman who was shot and killed, 28 years old. He's a white man at the time. He's an Air Force veteran. He had been seen openly carrying an AK-47 rifle at that time, which of course is legal. There are conflicting accounts as to whether Foster raised the rifle to the driver first, but seconds later, Perry, who was also legally armed, shot and killed Foster. Fled the area, said the police. He called the police and reported what happened, said that he shot in self-defense after Foster aimed his weapon at him. Right? So the articles, of course, are identifying the race of both parties. The case and Foster's death sparked outrage and debates over protester safety. The open carrying of firearms in the state's Stand Your Ground law, which allows people to use deadly force against someone if they feel they are in danger. If Perry goes to trial, a conviction could hinge on which man a jury determines made a threat first. Okay, it's a big ask. We're going to watch the video here, at least the first part of it, here in a minute. How do you determine which person started this thing? We have Clint Broden, a Dallas-based attorney. He expressed disappointment, saying that his client was acting out of self-defense, and he's confident that it was something that is going to result in an acquittal. Okay, so let's take a look at what's going on here. Here is Garrett Foster. We have some images from some of his other rallies or protests. So here's Garrett Foster, and you can see we've got some other images of him, right? So he's souped up here a little bit, and he's out there. He's got his face mask on. He's got his AK on. He's got a hat on. He's got his cell phone, his sling, and some other things. And there's several images that were sort of gathered of him wearing the same getup. I don't know if this is all from the same night or from different events, but it kind of looks like he's wearing the same outfit. So maybe it's the same, the exact same event. So multiple pictures come out, and you can just sort of see what he's wearing. And let's take a look at the video. Let me just say, first of all, right, these situations are just so unnecessarily painful. I think I understand protesting. I understand people wanting to, get out and make their voice heard. I'm a big proponent of making your voice heard. I try to do what I can here. But when we have situations like this, where you're sort of, arming yourself up and just, and going out to these places, it can invite problems like this. And we see it. We see it with Rittenhouse. We've seen it here. We've seen it all the different places that we look. So let's watch what's happening here. Let's keep this in context. The whole thing is just tragic because I just don't know what good this achieved other than we now have a dead guy and we have another guy who is being charged with murder. So it's just sad all around. I want to show you this video. This is just for context. Okay. We're going to hear some gunshots in this, but quickly, let me show you. This is the car that we're talking about. Okay. So this is the sergeant's car that we're thinking is the car. He's driving down the road. A lot of people are in the road. We're going to hear a honk and we're going to see some people turn the other direction. They're just going to go, oh, did you honk at us? Are you trying to run us over? What's going on here? And then we're going to hear some gunshots right after that. So let's take a listen. Watch what happens here.
Every time. Every time. Every time. Every time. Every time. Everybody back up.
All right. So after that, the camera just kind of, goes off because everybody scrambles. And then you go back and you see the man, Foster down on the ground and somebody's, giving him chest compressions. And so you start to see, sort of the aftermath. And of course, we didn't play that, but I just wanted to show you for context there, right? A couple dozen people right in that immediate vicinity, a lot of activity happening there, right? A lot of people yelling things. It's dark. You've got a hard line of sight on anything. All right. So what happens now, right? Now we have to say it's a year later. This happened almost 1 year ago. And so we've got a lot of investigations happening. We have a lot of, everybody sort of dissecting the case, interviewing witnesses, reviewing surveillance footage. And at some point, the government has to make a decision. Are we going to charge this person with murder? Yes or no? And there are probably no real time constraints on this case because it was a murder charge. I would guess that they could have filed this later, but I'm not positive, right? Sometimes you have strict statute of limitations, which means you got to file the charge sooner rather than later. So maybe they made that decision. Regardless, they did their investigation. They decided that charges needed to be filed. And I want to show you what the indictment looks like. So here we've got, if we go over to Texas court, we don't actually get a copy of the indictment itself. I have not found that quite yet. I was looking this morning, but we do see 2 cause numbers filed against Daniel Perry, 2 indictments filed 6/25/2021. And you're going to notice down here, we've got an indictment from a grand jury, the 331st grand jury, a motion, signed orders. We have warrants returned. And then we all know that he was released on bond, a $300,000 bond. And so I was trying to find the indictment because I wanted to see sort of, specifically what was in there. And when I was looking this morning, it was not quite out yet. But we are going to hear right now from the district attorney. Okay, he's the Travis County district attorney. His name is Jose Garza. And we're going to hear from him. He's going to tell us that they presented over 150 exhibits. 150 exhibits, 22 witnesses. And he said that this grand jury proceeding took 3 weeks in order to present this case. So as we've talked about here on the show, when this stuff happens, this is all behind closed doors, right? Grand jury proceedings are secret. Sometimes there are some rules where a defendant might be able to come in and submit what's called a Trebus letter, where you can sort of send a letter in and make your case. You can even at times go in and actually testify there, apparently in Texas. And so that was all declined, right? So it sounds like right now in this 3-week grand jury proceeding that this was only the government's case, that the grand jury only heard this stuff, 22 witnesses, 150 evidence exhibits over 3 weeks, which is standard, right? That's how this works most of the time. But it sounds like the sergeant just declined to go out there and be a part of it, which is probably the wise decision. The reason being is there are different standards. Okay, with a grand jury, we're talking about a much lower standard than you would in a court. So you sort of want to save your defenses for later down in the trial process. All right, so enough of that. Let's listen in and see what Jose Garza has to say. Here he is.
We're also going to be making some announcements with respect to the death of Garrett Foster. Our office is also announcing today that a Travis County grand jury has returned indictments against Daniel Perry for the charges of murder and aggravated assault in the death of Garrett Foster. The grand jury also returned 1 indictment for a misdemeanor count of deadly conduct. Mr. Foster was fatally shot while participating in a protest in Austin in July 2020. Evidence presented by our Homicide and Major Crimes Unit included over 150 exhibits and testimony from 22 witnesses over 3 weeks. Prior to the grand jury's proceedings, in addition to the investigation that law enforcement conducted, the District Attorney's Office also reviewed evidence and interviewed witnesses in order to present the most accurate possible set of facts to the grand jury. Our heart goes out to all those impacted by this immeasurable loss, in particular Mr. Foster's family and friends.
All right, so that is District Attorney Jose Garza. So 150 evidence exhibits, 22 witnesses. That's a lot, right? That's a lot of evidence that they presented. And so you have to ask yourself, what presumably the other witnesses are the people who were there, right? A lot of people there, so they would have gathered their names and interviewed them. During a grand jury proceeding, the defense doesn't present any evidence, so we don't know what Sergeant Perry has on from his perspective. So we'll see where this case goes. But now it's it's another murder charge that is sort of coming out of the summer of unrest, and it is for what? What do we get out of that? Did we get any meaningful reform? Did we get any justice reformation in this country as a result? No. The George Floyd bill is dead. Nothing's happening there, right? Joe Biden and Jen Psaki are now turning around and saying, well, no, we're all for fund the police. In fact, $350 billion, take the COVID money. That's how excited we are about law enforcement. So been saying that for some time here, but now it is unfortunately coming true. Going to be a lot of law enforcement out there on the back of this new administration. They've always been in favor of big police, which means if you need a good lawyer, well, R&R Law Group might be the one for you. We're located in Scottsdale, Arizona. We offer free case evaluations. You can schedule online. You can get a free consultation at 480-787-0394 or over at rrlawaz.com. We can help with any type of criminal charge in the state of Arizona. Things like DUIs, misdemeanor, domestic violence, felony offenses, anything and everything in between. We have a whole team of people who are just dedicated to helping good people get through the system so that we can help them get things back on track. If you need any help at all, we would love the opportunity, and we would really appreciate any of your referrals. We'll make sure we take very good care of them. Now, if you don't need any legal services, that's a good thing, but you may want some information. There is a law enforcement interaction training program that is available over at gumroad.com/Robert Gruler. If you're an attorney or somebody in the legal space, definitely check out the Gruler Method Legal Mastermind. We meet twice a month. We talk about law firm strategies, how we can be better advocates and better and more effective for our clients and for our teams. So it's a lot of fun. I want to invite you to go check that out. robertgruler.com/Gumroad. All right, let's take a look at what's going on in the chat over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. We have ZZ the Boxy Cat. So I saw this earlier. Says, hey, maybe we shouldn't be sharing the locals chat on YouTube because it gets a little bit spicy in here. So I'm going to do my best to sort of make sure that we're being in control. We've got Macabre8519 says, would you ever consider doing a legal analysis of Van Buren versus the U.S. SCOTUS decision? I don't know what that is off the top of my head. So I'll have to take a look at it before I make a decision on that. Nadarb says the chat is so spicy, it'll make you want to slap your mama, which is, that's like really spicy because I would never do that. Thunder has a question. Thunder asked a question about, let's see where this is. He says, Rob, are there now any police shootings are any police shootings justified now if the officer is white? How can they charge him with murder when the deceased was carrying an AK-47, ran his car into the crowd? Mass shooter, the police officer saved lives, but he gets charged. So it's a good question, Thunder. So I don't actually think that was a police officer. That was a sergeant. And, it's a good question, right? I don't know. It's hard to see from that angle really what happened there. And then the reason I played that is because I think it's going to be hard to see from any angle. And remember what's happening here, right? We've got somebody in a car that is sort of surrounded by a bunch of people, and he honks, and it looks like they might be getting agitated and sort of, crashing down on his car. And so then he has to make a decision. And now you're at a situation where you're sort of, two people who flinches first, who draws first. And you saw Garrett Foster had his AK sort of, hanging on a sling over his shoulder. And it's like, if you just, like rotate a little bit, it might look like you're, raising your firearm, and you've got just a situation where everybody is just so volatile that it is like a pressure cooker. Something's going to go off, and it did. And now we have somebody being charged with murder. His life's over. We have Garrett Foster and his fiance. Their lives are over for what? For I don't know. To go out there and stand around? I don't know. Not a fan of it. I don't like when we lose people for stuff like that. I don't like when we lose people anyways, but it bums me out. All right, we've got who's next? We got Jeremy says, any idea what triggered the grand jury? When is a grand jury used and who brings one together? So it's a great question, Jeremy. And that's going to be the prosecutor's office. So, typically when these things happen, you can file charges kind of one of two ways. You can call it a direct complaint where sort of the government says, we've got enough here. We're going to file a felony charge against one particular person. Or if they're not sure, if it's kind of a situation where they're like, we don't want to make this charging decision because we just don't know. And it may be a little bit too politically volatile, well, then they'll build their case and they'll say, we're going to just give this all over to the grand jury and we're going to let them decide. That way we can take some of the politics out of it a little bit, which is what happened here. But of course, that's not going to take any politics out of it. It defrays the duty a little bit. It delegates it to another more independent body. And then the prosecutor can come back and say, listen, they returned the indictment and we're going to prosecute it based on their finding that there was enough probable cause to bring these charges forward. Good question. We've got Ghost Gunner is here, says, I avoid taking the pavement temp challenge by not pointing my rifle at people. The memes on this one were very spicy when it happened. Yeah. A lot of spicy memes out there. Got to be careful about those spicy memes over here. Let's see what else. We've got Three Girlies says, both seem to be carrying legally. That's right. Nadarb's here says, there was another angle out there from across the street, if I remember correctly. Okay, so yeah, I haven't seen that. I didn't spend much time digging into some of the clips. Which is such a bummer. We did a frame by frame of Rittenhouse here, and YouTube was not happy about that. So we got to be careful with some of that content. All right, let's see who else is next. We've got Jeremy Matrita here says, any idea? We got that one. Soul Viking says, since this is part of Texas, it is about as blue as can be in that part. It will be interesting to see how this case proceeds, what they seek. Another example of a terrible waste of life. Yeah, right. It's just awful. It's like, both lives are just ruined as a result of what? I don't know. All right. We have Want to Know says, grand juries are used to indict a ham sandwich, and so ADA can figure out how you will testify. A small speed bump. All right. And our last one here of the day, it looks like it's coming in from Be Brave, says, so glad I can watch this on Rumble instead of YouTube, which I'm grateful that you're over there. Be Brave. That's fun. Yeah, we're live streaming on Rumble now, and we're also live streaming on Locals now, but we're not doing it simultaneously. We have to do it independently because it's still in beta. We're still waiting for Locals to finish the finishing touches. We're going to be very patient there, and we tried it this yesterday. We tried a live stream over there, and it worked great, and everybody said that the quality was good, and so it's like, man, we're making some progress. I've been saying this for a long time. Every kind of day that goes by, brick by brick, there are alternatives being built to YouTube, to Twitter, to Facebook, and that's a good thing. A little bit more diversity. All right, we have Nadarb said, let's see, someone had a question you missed earlier, but I don't know where. Let's see if I can find it quickly. Let's go back over to the chat. What else do we have? We have some comments. I got to go a little more. Well, I apologize for that, Nadarb. I'll see if I can maybe find that and round that up for tomorrow. We've got Tree Mendes is here. We got Tree Mendes in the house. Says, happy belated birthday to you, Mom. My dad's birthday is also the 4th. How fun. That's great. Celebrating America with your father. I'm doing it with my mother. It's a lot of fun. We've got, let's see who else before we wrap up. ZZ the Boxing Cat says, kudos to the tech team. Love that tech team. Nice job, tech team. Doing a good job over there. And thank you, ZZ Boxing Cat, for your comments. Jeremy Matrita said, I found multiple articles titled Soros-funded DA indicts Army sergeant, and we've seen a lot of that. Kim Gardner out of, I think that was that Louisiana? Somewhere in the South over there. Missouri, maybe. Kim Gardner, I think, was out of Missouri. That's right. St. Louis, Missouri, with the McCloskeys. We have, who else do we have? Letitia James, I think, was another Soros prosecutor out of New York, the New York Attorney General. And we've got a lot of other prosecutors around the country as well, doing the very same thing. And those were all great questions. They came over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Want to invite you to join us over there because we have a monthly meetup coming up on Saturday, July 24th, right here, 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern time. going to be a lot of fun if you want to register for this. This will be our third Zoom meetup, and it's available at watchingthewatchers.locals.com, and I want to invite you to go and check that out. And that, my friends, is it for me for the day on this lovely Monday. I hope everybody had a very happy 4th. Thank you so much for joining me here. We're going to be back here the rest of the week at the same place, same time, talking about probably most of the same stuff, because there's a lot going on out there in the world, and we got to watch it all together. So I want to thank you all for being here. Everybody have a tremendous evening. Sleep very well. I will see you right back here, same time, same place, 4 p.m. Arizona time, which is 4 p.m. Pacific time, which is 5 p.m. Mountain, 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern time on the East Coast. And for that one Florida man, everybody else, thank you so much for being here. Have a tremendous evening, and I'll see you right here tomorrow. Bye-bye.